Dan Wetzel, Yahoo Sports, joins us on 365 Sports on the day after the ACC settlement with Clemson and Florida State. What does it mean? Dan, thank you very much. I watched part of your podcast with Ross and Pat Forty, et cetera. What do you think this actually means? Is it peace and quiet, or is this just the calm before yet another storm down the road?
Realignment never sleeps, right? I think it's, I don't know. You never you always say calm, and then there's something happens, but it would seem that way. The big issue right now is there's no incentive for the Big Ten or the SEC to expand at this moment. They both have media deals locked up. Even if they added teams, they would get more money. There's not like an open, you'd renegotiate. ESPN's not in the mood to renegotiate. They want the ACC to do well. They have an ACC deal also. That's a good deal for ESPN. So they're, it's like, where are you going? So for Clemson and Florida State, who are suing to get out of their grant of rights and have the ability to go to another conference, even if they were to wave a magic wand and be free right now, there's probably not a home to go to. Maybe if they're available, that changes, but there's nobody banging on the door. So what this does is in all likelihood create 5-6 years of stability at the ACC until the grant of rights, the cost of buying back your rights to leave, gets to a reasonable number of about $75 million. And by that point in 2030, the Big Ten will be looking for a new media deal. The Big 12 would be looking for a new media deal. The NCAA basketball tournament would be up. There could be a whole lot of tumult at that point. But I think what this should do is keep everything as the status quo for the next, 4 or 5 years, because it just makes economic sense for everybody to just sort of stand pat. And I guess we'll see what the world looks like in 5 years. It's hard to look back. You think this is what it'll be because this is how it is now, but you look back 5 years ago and you wouldn't have believed where we were at. First off, 5 years ago, we're about to go into COVID. So it was really wild time, but you don't know. Who knows what 5 years, what are network televisions? What are, is Netflix the player at that point? There's so many things that could be upheaved between now and then. So I think we're going to get some stability, which is what the ACC was going for. It's not the best deal for the ACC, but it's better than being the Pac-12.
So how does the ACC convince Florida State and Clemson to stay in 5 years? And how do they get better across the board so that if they do, in fact, leave, it doesn't sting as much?
So the first part is really what they're doing right now, which is giving them more money. And if this is based now on television ratings, not success. Florida State's a big brand, as they like to say. It's got a big fan base. It's in the state of Florida. It also went 2-10 last year, but it can attract big television numbers, particularly in some of their rivalry games. The ACC is going to have Notre Dame play Clemson, Miami, and Florida State more often. That always delivers good ratings anytime you can play Notre Dame. So the possibilities are here for Clemson and Florida State, those type of programs, to get 15 to 20 million additional dollars each year in their conference revenue, which would put them pretty close to what the Big Ten and the SEC are getting. And I know I've said this on the show, I hate that we root for revenue. Fans root for revenue and ratings and
Amen.
things when it's about winning. And congrats. Okay, look, Clemson doesn't make as much money as Purdue football. Purdue football makes more money than Clemson. Who cares? Clemson's won national titles. Purdue doesn't. Which program would you? If you're a fan, who would you rather be a part of? Is it all just how much do you cheer because they remodeled the AD's office, or we were able to buy out a defensive coordinator's contract? Great. I'd rather win. So I think that's the second part. You're going to give them a lot of money, and they're going to be in the ballpark. And then here's the thing. It's a lot easier to win in the ACC than it is if you say, okay, now I'm going to go to the SEC. or I'm going to go to the Big Ten and try to win there. Especially if we expand this playoff and there's like two guaranteed spots in the ACC to the playoff, which is a real possibility. I don't love that, but let's say that's where we go. It's a lot easier to finish top 2 in the ACC if you're Florida State and Clemson against a bunch of schools that, are not on your equal. Maybe in North Carolina is, maybe in Miami, but most of the schools are not of your equal than it is to go into the SEC and say, I'll finish top 4. And so if they can offer a close enough amount of money and a path to not just the playoff, but to winning, which would create more money because fans would be excited and you'd be selling tickets and T-shirts and all of that stuff and donations, then perhaps that's the route you could go. I always thought one of the reasons the Big 12 should have been driving the force for a playoff was because if you go back when Oklahoma and Texas were in that league, they could have said, hey, look at how easy your path is to get in. You have advantages over the other teams in the league, Oklahoma. Why would you leave this to get into the dogfight of the SEC where, Oklahoma was making a lot of playoffs out of the Big 12. I doubt, nothing against Oklahoma. Maybe they do it, maybe they don't. Great program, but I doubt they make it as often when they're in the SEC because it's just a tougher sledding. So maybe you can do that. Will that work? Probably not. But I think you at least have a time frame where you can look and say, all right, over the next 5 years, let's build towards that. Say, hey, this grass right here is better than just going into some super conference. And here's the thing: you go to the SEC, it is a dogfight. You go to the Big Ten, great. Welcome to the Big Ten. You know who isn't moving out of the top of the Big Ten? Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. Like, you're not getting them out of the way. They're going to be there. So you're those teams. You're the big programs in your league. Why not just be that? I wish we could go back and have 5, 6, 7 really good leagues, like-minded schools, 10 teams a league, round robin, all of that stuff. Like conference realignment has done such damage to college sports more than these lawsuits and NIL and the transfer portal and anything else. It's just this constant drive for a little bit more money that's just, to me, has caused so much tumult in college football and basketball.
No, I think you're dead on dead, and it's fun to talk about TV ratings and things like that and mention them and compare them to things, but like the whole bragging rights aspect of it, as though it's like these accomplishments for everybody to root for the networks, just feels really backwards and very weird. But there's been a lot of talk about Notre Dame and, eventually they're going to be forced to do this and eventually they'll be forced to do that. And then last year they make more money than anybody, basically, just being independent old Notre Dame. They're going to try and be that for as long as they can. But do you see these as some of the moving pieces that eventually force them into a situation where they no longer have that choice years maybe down the line?
Maybe. Right now they have a great situation because they get 5 games every year. They have the scheduling certainty of 5 ACC games. And it's going to be 2 of those games are going to be against Clemson, Florida State, or Miami, like a rotation. So you're getting some marquee games there. That's 5. And people always say, well, they're not in a conference. Well, they play 5 ACC teams. They play Navy every single year. And they play Stanford and USC every single year. So they basically have 8 games every year lined up, and then they have 4 non-conference. So they're kind of in a conference. It's just their own conference. And it works perfectly for them. They're able to get a maximum number of home games. They play this thing called the Shamrock Series. They'll move around the country. They play all over the country where Notre Dame wants to do it. If they lose that scheduling ability, that's the thing that would drive them potentially to a to a conference. Because if the Big Ten and if all these teams go to the Big Ten and the SEC, and kind of lock them out of a good schedule, is there enough other teams to schedule, or could they maybe get that same deal with what's left of the ACC or the Big 12? I don't know. Notre Dame is going to do everything it can to stay independent. It works for them. It's a point of pride. It's what the university wants to be. I think it's the key to them being successful is being able to recruit all over the country and be a national program rather than just another program in the Midwest. And they'll do everything they can. But this is not a great thing for Notre Dame. What they've got right now is a great thing for Notre Dame. And you can see it with this playoff and with Marcus Freeman. Like, this is a hot program now, right? Made the championship game. I would imagine they'd be preseason top 5, if not top 3. There's no reason that you wouldn't look at it and go, yeah, Notre Dame's in a great spot for the next half decade. But could this push them into something else? I don't know. But if they just have to join the Big Ten, they're just kind of like another Big Ten team, albeit they would be playing, at that point, the Big Ten would be basically a national league anyway.
How worried should the non-money makers in the power leagues be after this? Because this sets out a roadmap for big schools in the power leagues to get more money because they could just copy this in their next deals. And it sets apart the thing that I'm sure that every Vanderbilt and Rutgers and Minnesota and all that worry about anyway is when do they get to the point where they tell us we're in a different league now?
You know, it's hard to say. Obviously, it's something to keep an eye on because if you're Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State, you're looking at this going, if you're Rutgers, Rutgers got into the Big Ten because the Big Ten wanted to put the Big Ten network on basic cable channels and basically tax all the people who lived in the state of New Jersey, whether they were Rutgers fans or not, or college sports fans or not, to pay, $1 a house for the Big Ten network. It was a tax. That's what it was. That was the only reason. There was no reason to add Rutgers or Maryland other than they had a lot of cable homes in their state. Well, basic cable is decreasing in influence. The carriage fees are lowering. At what point are you no longer useful? And if you're Ohio State and Michigan, you're like, look at our games. We're the only ones. No one's watching Rutgers football unless they're playing Ohio State or Michigan or Penn State. You could see where someone say, hey, why don't we get more money? At what point do we change this? There is one thing, same with, Mississippi. Why do you have 2 teams in Mississippi? I hate these conversations. Why do you have them? Because it's awesome. That's why. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, who cares? I'm tired of television market and revenue and because it creates there's a culture to the SEC or there's a culture to the Big Ten, but the Big Ten is now 18 teams big. It's all over the place. What is the Big Ten anymore? And that, I think, you risk the peeling off of some of the teams you brought in. There is something else to this, and that is, in the Big Ten, at least with some of the schools, I don't believe it's expanded to all 18, but certainly the older ones, there is also billions in research grants, in academic and science and all these different things that completely trump what football will bring in. And so there's incredible value in being involved in the Big Ten as an academic institution. And there are, I know we forget, but there are actual colleges right next to the stadium. It's amazing. There's more to this than just football. So that's a big part of it too. I don't know whether they'd be kicking people out. Imagine the lawsuits of that, but I wouldn't sleep totally easy because you tell me why Ohio State should get the same share as Maryland. I don't know why. Just because.
If the conferences that those schools are a part of are not afraid to separate from others because they feel like they deserve more and they've earned it too, then one day it should not surprise anybody that teams within the conference that they've protected before might be looked at differently down the stretch. You would think that if you're a part of the original SEC, and I know Tulane was at one point, I'm not talking about that, but you would think that that's going to still mean something. But who knows, Dan? I mean, at any time, I mean, you might see people separate, or like FSU and Clemson, who we deserve more than NC State, Boston College, or somebody else.
Yeah. And I think one of the arguments are like, look, we're Florida State. We spend $175 million on athletics, and you're, one of those lower schools, and you spend $85 million. What are we doing? Why are we in this? I can't rule anything out anymore once a 108-year Pac-12 was taken apart. Like what? Like once that went, I guess that was and there was a million breaking points before that, but when that went, it was like, what exactly are we doing here? Like, what is going on? Just so we can have, the Big Ten has to have 4 teams in the West Coast. They could have done that with a scheduling agreement, and not destroyed the Pac-12 with Cal and Stanford and SMU in the Atlantic Coast Conference. They're not. I mean, it's like one bad move just begets another bad move and another bad. And it's just dominoes falling. At some point, it's like, can we just take the dominoes out? Are we going to get private equity in this? Like, everything is just done on a spreadsheet now. And I get, look, I've said this on the show. We've talked about I'm not preaching to the choir, but it's like, I get it doesn't make perfect business sense, but that's not a bug. That's the feature. If you love college sports, that's the part you like. I don't want to just sit there and watch 32 of the biggest brands. I can do that on Sunday. I want to watch all of this stuff. I look at games and say, this is an exciting game. It doesn't have to be the 2 biggest brands. I don't care about the brands. I care about the teams, the stories, whatever. If Ashton Genty that guy was an exciting player this year. So what if he's in Boise, Idaho? That's great. It's part of the charm of the whole thing. I want all of it, and that's what you just continually hope that the leaders of college sports are protecting what college sports really is, rather than just this chase for more money. And it's just like, who needs the money? Why is this not working? They cry poverty, but it's like you're paying $3 million for a defensive coordinator. Who made you do that? There's all sorts of ways that this doesn't have to. It's not like the sport is broke. It's not like no one's watching. It's extremely successful. It's never been more popular. It's never been more profitable. Why are we just keep squeezing and squeezing and squeezing to the point where all of a sudden Tobacco Road basketball is no longer a thing? Well, you know what? I'm not going to tell you I'm the biggest watch on every college basketball game out of Tobacco Road, but all of us like it, right?
Yeah.
That's what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important. It's important to the people there. It's important to the fabric of college sports. It's great. And, Duke, Carolina, NC State, Wake, we all know, let them play. And you hate to see, we got to lose that because we can get $5 million more dollars. Okay, what are we doing?
Dan, you're going to love Big 12 Duke versus SEC North Carolina and Las Vegas to tip off the 2020 whatever season here coming up.
Probably coming. It's probably coming. I don't know.
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, these games went out. I mean, you look at the Big 12 basketball. It's so awesome, right? And I even love the way. I've always been pro NIL because I look at how there's this constant screaming, we need more money because of this and that. Like, you look at college basketball right now. All sorts of teams are winning that didn't win before. Mm-hmm. It's not. We used to have the blue bloods, right? And it was basically Nike and Adidas choosing where all the players went. And now we've got, Houston and Iowa State, and all these teams are good. Auburn, and it's a fresh blood in there, and I love that. And they would have told you that was all going to die. So we got to break up all these leagues because that's going to be impossible, and because it's only going to be the rich getting richer. And then you look on the field and you look on the court and you go, well, it's not the rich getting richer. It's no longer the top 10. Look at the top 10. This doesn't look like the top 10 years ago.
KU,
and that's what I love.
yeah, KU, North Carolina. Baylor's not a part of that blue blood, but recent national champion. UConn all dropped out of the top 25 as preseason top 10 this year at one point. That was an interesting part of the season. Dan, thank you very much as always. We appreciate your time whenever you can give it to us, and have a great rest of your week.
Always great to be on with you guys.
Thank
Take care.
you.